Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land. And I'm your host, Rolene Marks. And today, like every day, we take a look at the top stories making the headlines in Israel. So without further ado, let's go to Qatar, where our top story of the day is that the Qataris have said to Hamas, who they often offer financial support and bailouts to, that as of April, they will no longer be paying the electricity bill. Now, Qatar, apart from being the place where some of Hamas's leadership are living the life of Riley while their citizens are suffering, Qatar gives Hamas some $10 million a month for their electricity bill, but have said that due to disappointing progress in fixing infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, they will no longer be paying Hamas's electricity bill. Moving now to France, and as we speak, thousands of French citizens around the country are gathering together to march against anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has soared astronomically in Europe, and in statistics published by the Guardian newspaper this past weekend, the statistics have it at a 74% increase in France alone from 1 year to the other year. So that will be from 2017 to 2018. And coupled with this will be proposed legislation that a group of parliamentarians will put to the government later this week, where they propose that anti-Zionism is a form of anti-Semitism, and should this legislation be passed, it will make anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism a crime. And this is very, very welcome legislation indeed, after some of the most horrific events that have occurred in France against the Jewish community within the last couple of years. The murders in the Hyper Caché, a murder of Ilan Khalimi and a Holocaust survivor, and more recently the vile verbal abuse against one of France's national treasures, a Jewish philosopher, Alain Finkielkraut, who was called unspeakable things by members of the Yellow Jackets, this far left phenomenon that protests very often in France, initially started to protest fuel hikes, but have allowed for gross anti-Semitism to creep in, and it's becoming more and more prevalent. They've called President Emmanuel Macron, who will be joining the CRIF, the umbrella body of France's Jewish community, tonight for a dinner. They have referred to him as a Jewish whore, making, kind of, or alluding to his past as a banker. And they've also defaced the images of another of France's national treasures, a Holocaust survivor, Simone Veil, as well as hurled verbal abuse at Jews and defaced property. So should this happen, this is very, very welcome legislation, and we're hoping that other countries will follow suit. And, while we are talking about other countries and what's happening, a request from one of our viewers, Vanessa, wanted to have some commentary on this phenomenon of ISIS brides returning back to Britain. Now, over the last year or so, ISIS, the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, has been virtually defeated, and now their brides want to return home to their countries of origin. In this case, it is Britain. And as you can imagine, ISIS, who have been responsible for a number of terror attacks, including that of the beheading of soldier Lee Rigby, as well as the Manchester bombings at the Ariana Grande concert, which saw a number of people killed, you can imagine that the British people are not very happy about the fact that they are returning home. And the defense attorney for one of the ISIS brides described her as being treated worse than a Nazi war criminal. Now, of course, we take huge exception to this. His rationale was that at least the Nazis were given a due process. But, we must remind viewers of the types of crimes carried out by ISIS and sanctioned by their brides, who have said that they have no problem with beheadings or with torture. And just as a woman, I would want to ask them, don't you have a problem with the treatment of young girls kidnapped, barely in their teens, to be used as sex slaves and their mothers killed, and the most gross form of torture to women and non-believers by ISIS terminology across the Middle East? So very, very controversial indeed, and a story also popping up in the US as well. And then our last story for the day, and as we embark on April the 9th election watch, we are due to hear from Avigdor Lieberman and his party Yisrael Biteinu. Now, Avigdor Lieberman has served as our former foreign minister as well as our defense minister, and in a shock resignation just hours before the last ceasefire between Israel and Hamas went into place, he resigned, possibly hoping to snooker Prime Minister Netanyahu by saying, he does not capitulate, he gets the job done. But polling today has Yisrael Biteinu predicted to get maybe 4 to 5 seats in the Knesset. They are hoping for 8 to 9, which would be an increase on their current 6. So we wait to hear from Avigdor Lieberman, who will announce his slate later today. And as always, you can check out our website at www.layoftheland.online, www.layoftheland.online. And today you can read about Amnesty International. Have they completely lost the plot? You can also subscribe to get your daily update by clicking on the button below or on the notification bell at the side of this video. And don't forget, you can like and follow us on Facebook at Lotl Site, at LOTL Site. And that's it for today. This is the Israel Brief. I'm Rolene Marks, and I'll bring you tomorrow's headlines tomorrow.